What's good, everybody? Welcome to another video. If we haven't met yet, my name is Ted and I talk bass. Listen, you need to go on and grab you a drink, some popcorn, your spouse, another bass player, and get in on this conversation right now. Usually when we hear the term DOA, it's a bad thing. Today, it's a good thing. It's a good thing, right? And before I bring this brother on, I want to embarrass him just a little bit because here's the deal. If you don't know his name, you know his sound. Understand, I got some notes here. I have to read the notes because the accolades are so long. This brother has over 20 number one hit records, 20, over 40 top 10 records. Check this out. This is a short list. Tour credits, El DeBarge, Shalimar, True, Cameron White, Come On 90s R&B, Janet Jackson, The Callaways, Bobby Brown, TLC, New Edition, Derek DOA Allen has done some of it all. And I don't, you can't get the game from a better person. So DOA, man, I appreciate you being here, bro.
Man, Ted, thank you, brother. Thank you for that introduction, man. I'm usually on usually on the other side. So, man, I appreciate you, man, so much, and I'm so happy you chose me to have this conversation with you, man. We can talk about whatever you want. I'm here. You got me. Whatever you want to talk about,
And
man.
look, like I was saying before we got started, man, I really, really appreciate you jumping on. I've always admired your playing, and then kind of getting to know you via social media has been a real pleasure. And speaking of that, won't you go on and shout out? I know you got a podcast that you do, an interview show that you do, a lot of content on Instagram, lot of phone content. Can you speak a little bit on that?
Yeah, so yeah, I got my playlist. It's called the DOA playlist on YouTube. And man, the main reason why I wanted to do it, the playlist was because of stuff like this here. I mean, brothers and sisters like you and I, man, we've always been calling what it is. We've been side man. We've been doing this thing for a long time. We've been extremely blessed, and that's good, but we have a story as well. We have a deeper story than people just seeing us up there playing and doing what it is we're doing to make an artist look good. So the platform is basically so people like yourself and other musicians and artists and just whoever. I got a variety of people can tell their story that's never been told. So the DOA playlist, and then my Instagram, it's basically mainly about bass stuff, man. I really don't play anymore, like out or tour or anything. So it just kind of gives me a way to kind of play and get people to, check out my style of playing. And if they have questions or they want to learn something, I talk about that or whatever. So I'm having fun with it, man. It's crazy because I haven't been on social media long. And for years and years and years, Eric could tell you, man, Pick could tell you, people who know me would tell you, that I never wanted to ever be on social media, Ted. Never, man. I never. So for years, people was always wondering, like, who is this DOA cat? We keep hearing it. And E. Smith is one of the guys who always, if it wasn't for him, man, I probably would have been forgotten about, because that my little brother, man, he would always just tell people about me, but nobody could go find anything on social media. I never was on Facebook, none of the platforms. And so I finally got on when the world shut down. So my Instagram, man, has been really cool. I've been having fun and just sharing with people. So at DOA Allen, if you want to follow me on Instagram, at DOA Allen. The playlist is the DOA playlist on YouTube. It's a variety of content on there, some great, great, powerful conversations of some of your favorite people, and my favorite people. And so yeah, I'm really digging it, man. I'm
Love
having
it.
yeah. Thanks, man.
Love it. Love it. Eric is, you know, and I want to get into this a little bit more as we continue the conversation, but thinking about Eric, he has played with everybody. He's played with everybody. Like I've met people and that have like these massive egos, and I'm like, you ain't done nothing. You are, and I'm not trying to be ugly, but I'm like, man, you ain't done nothing. And I know cats who have played, they've been on everything with everybody, and they're some of the most humble people. And Eric, we can't share everything that we be that goes on in DMs and stuff like that. But that boy is hilarious. You know what I'm saying? I mean, just like regular people never change. So you know, I know you answer this question or you've talked about this before, and I'm gonna ask you to do it again, but I want to know, how does Derek Allen become DOA with all these accolades and hit records and all these things? What was that journey all about?
Wow, that's a great question, T. So for me, it basically started. The bass started as a kid. You know, it started really first on guitar, man. I started on guitar. I was going to my uncle's church, the kind
Always
of
the church.
always the church, man. And my uncle was the pastor. He was the mechanic. He was the doctor. He was the therapist. He was that sort of guy because it was a very small Baptist church. And he also was the musician for the church. He played guitar. So I used to be just intrigued by him, just watching him play guitar. That's what I just wanted to do that. That's what kind of inspired me watching my uncle. And finally, my father was a garbage man. And I had been begging for a guitar. And this dude brought me a guitar home from his garbage route from the junkyard. Every week they would go to the junkyard. So he found a box guitar, a acoustic guitar. We used to call it the box. And it only had 5 strings on it. And it was beat up. It was dirty. It was just the worst thing ever. And so my dad gave me that guitar. And I was like, I had a little attitude with it because I was like, hey man, this is not like my uncle's guitars. Don't look like this. I'm a little kid, and it only has 5 strings. And my dad was like, listen, you go get that thing and you make it kick. If Jesus can make it kick, you got to make it kick because Jesus can make it kick. So I want you to make it. So that's where it started, man. Then guitar got a little difficult for me. Then I discovered the deacon at the church playing a bass guitar with 4 strings. And I said to myself, now that looks like something I could do. And finally, man, after a couple of years, my dad and my mother bought me a bass guitar from the pawn shop. And that's where I fell in love with guitar. So I was in the third with the bass in third grade. And I was my first like time playing in a quartet group. Because for me, it started with the quartet world, as most brothers down here in Northern California, it's the quartet world for us. And so me, it was always quartet. It never was choirs for me. It was always the quartet world. That's where the journey started as a bass player, right? And
Mhm.
so down through the years, as I got older, um, touring with this quartet group from third grade on up, man, on up to my teenage years. And we did like a few tours, like down south in the van and the trailers and the whole nine. And then as I got older and got into high school, and I ventured off, and my teacher let me play in a jazz band in the 11th grade, and I didn't know how to read, but I knew I was could play with the jazz band because I relied on my ear. My ear was all I had, and
Mhm.
so I had a talk with my teacher one day, with the teacher of the jazz band of the jazz ensemble, and I told him that I played bass. I would love to play with the band. He asked me, could I read? I said, no, I can't read. He said, well, how do you expect to be in the band? I said, I can hear. So he said, come to like a class the next day, and I did. He said, I just want you to sit down and listen, and I did. And then afterwards, he asked me what I thought. I said, "Listen, I can. You're breaking these charts down, and you're teaching these students how to play." I said, "Listen, I could play this music. I could play it." So what he did was he gave me a cassette with like 3 tunes on it. And at that time, man, it was stuff like Spain, and we playing stuff like Watermelon Man, and the typical peg, the stuff that you played. And
Mhm.
she said, "Take this home, come back tomorrow, and let me see if you can play it." I did. I practiced. I listened to it. I had all three songs down. Showed up to class the next day while they're breaking down, all these things and quotas and bars and music. And I'm ready. I'm sitting down waiting on everybody. I'm ready to play everything as I'm hearing it. And once he discovered that, he allowed me to be in jazz band, and I loved it. I mean, it was he 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 gave me an opportunity, man, that I really, really valued and appreciated. That's when everything changed for me. That's when I said, I gotta do this. So
Did you start getting the reading thing together at that
I
time,
did.
or did you ever do that?
I didn't. And you know what's crazy? A funny story is that one day I was in class and I was just doodling around on the bass, and my teacher, he was looking over me, and he was a bass player as well.
Mm.
Great bass player. I mean, he played, upright and played, bass. He was phenomenal. So he's just standing there watching me. And then I look at him and he's shaking his head and he says, well, man, that's a damn shame. And I was
Mm.
like, okay, what, what did I do? What am I doing? I'm just playing. And he just saying, man, it's a damn shame. He said a little bit more than that, but I'm gonna keep it to a damn shame. And so I said, okay, so what's tell me what am I doing? He said, I'm watching you play. He said, I could, here's the problem. I could take everything you're playing right now and write it out, and I will play the hell out of everything you're doing. I can write it all out and see it. I said, okay. He said, but once you take that chart away from me, I'm lost. I
Mm.
said, okay. He said, you, on the other hand, I could put that chart in front of your face. It don't even matter. You could play it. I could take that chart away from you and you still can play it. I said, okay, so he said, the shame is that if you ever, and when you decide to learn how to read, there's nothing that can stop you from doing anything you want to do. And the shame is on me because I wish I had the ear and the talent that you had. I don't.
Mm.
I'm lost with that. The shame is on me. And I was like, whoa, I'm blown away. So
Mm.
when you say that, but I never had the discipline. I was like that kid that got the toys at Christmas, Ted, and I just didn't read the instructions. I just wanted to open the box and just start figuring it out on my own. And
Right.
that was always my thing with bass guitar. I never had the discipline to learn it, to read. I never had the patience. My mother was getting me lessons for a short period of time the private lessons at a music store, whatever.
Oh, your mom wasn't a musician. She was just buying,
My
getting.
mother was just my mother wasn't a musician. My mother sang though. My dad
Okay.
played a
Okay.
little bit. My dad played three chords all of his life, and they
Okay.
never, and he wrote about 1 million songs off them three chords: fast, slow, reggae, gospel, rock, everything.
Right. Right. Right.
So, but going to the classes, I was bored. I just couldn't take learning whole notes, and I just didn't have the patience,
Right.
and so I never did, man. But it didn't stop my journey. I just knew that God blessed me with something, and I would figure it out. So
Well,
then, go ahead.
no,
Uh-huh.
no. Finish your story.
So then it just led me to after I graduated, me and my best friend, we moved to LA I graduated in 84 and 85, he and I moved to LA and chased the dream. We just wanted to be some rock stars. We wanted to be, we wanted to play music. Me and my one of
So
my
you
best
grew up in Oakland, right?
I grew up in Sacramento.
In Sac. Okay. Okay.
Born and raised. Born and raised. Spent a lot of time in Oakland doing quartet music, and that's how I
Sure.
met Eric and Sadiq and Jubu
Yep.
and Carl and all of those guys because we
Yep.
grew up together. We grew up
Right.
together. But after on my journey, man,
Of course, Elijah too. Elijah.
Elijah, my little brother, man, that's my
Yeah.
man. That's
That's
my
another
guy, man.
cold cat,
Yeah,
boy.
that's my man, man. All those guys mean the world to me, man.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be here without those guys, and vice versa, man, because we lean and we depended on each other. The brotherhood was real.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Our brotherhood was real.
Listen, man, I don't, and I don't want to derail that part of the story, but since we brought up the Bay and, Sac all the way down to LA, when I left New Orleans, which is a music hub, right? You got legends out of New Orleans. I get to the Bay and I had just moved to the Bay because one, my auntie was out there. She was a part of that sort of mass exodus of blacks that left the South to go find work over at the docks, right? Her and her husband. So I just went to Oakland because I was getting in too much trouble in New Orleans.
Wow.
I still got in trouble in Oakland, but that's a story for another time. But what I didn't realize when I got out there was how much legendary music came out of the Bay Area, how many legendary musicians came out of, I was working at OAK, my first real job out there, and I'm working with this sister named Michelle, and she's got all these Polaroids of like Prince and Sheila E. and all that. And I'm from New Orleans, there's no internet or whatever. But I said, "Would you know them?" And she was like, "Yeah, Sheila E. is my cousin." In my mind, it's like, ain't no way. I haven't seen anything, right? She's like, "Yeah." And this is right before Thanksgiving. She said, "Why don't you come over for Thanksgiving?" My very first Thanksgiving in the Bay Area was not at my family's house, but at the Escovedo's house over in
That's
Alameda.
easy.
So,
That's
but through that, I mean, Rusty Allen, man, the Escovedos, Tower Power, all these groups, man, all these like legendary musicians, like right in your midst. And a lot of these folks are just going back and forth to LA, doing their thing or whatever. But anyway, I just wanted to interject
great, man.
with that, just thinking about everybody in that scene. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? So let me ask you this. When was the first big break for you?
The, when I moved to LA, when we left to LA, and we left when we left, Ted, we left. In other words, what I mean by that, we had made up in our minds that we were not coming back
Mm.
with nothing. If we're gonna leave, we're gonna come back with something. So in '85, we left, and I never forget talking to my mother. My mother gave me her last. She reached in her purse, man, and gave me $40. That's all she had. And my best friend's brothers had bought us a Pinto, old 75 raggedy Pinto, smoking up the whole place, and we had a trailer. We put everything in the back, and we started our journey. And so it was a struggle, man. It was really a serious struggle. It didn't happen overnight. 85, 86, around end of 86, 87 is when things kind of started to happen for us before, because we had been living like in the car, we've been sleeping in parks, we've been living in people's house, we was in harm's way. The story was deep. The story was a major struggle, but we were determined not to come back, and we were also determined not to let our families know how bad we were doing. We
Mm,
didn't want the
mm,
pressure of wanting them to come home, because right now you're out there on your own. We couldn't rely on mama's kitchen, mama's beds, mama's refrigerator, mama's stove, mama's lights, and we're on our own. So
mm,
the first really big thing happened, man, after, because we're collecting gigs, we're networking. We
mm,
want people to know about these two kids from Sacramento. So we were just, man, God just had his arms and his angels surrounded around us, and he was just putting us in places where we were meeting good people and networking, doing, meeting somebody who may had a $75 gig or a $50 gig or $100 gig. We would do that. And with that, we didn't have to stretch that until the next one. So we did all of that whole thing. The first real break came from, we were living with this lady in Redondo Beach, flipping myself. And we were all watching television. She had two kids, and she had she gave me a room, Flip a room to share in her duplex. And so Flip got a phone call from the he's the icon here, Mr. Robert Brookins, who he's gone now. So Flip got a phone call because Robert's from Sacramento, but Robert was the giant. Robert was doing I mean, not he was doing, he was producing everybody from George Duke to Stanley Clark to Stephanie Mills. He was big in the 80s, right? We knew him. We idolized him. He was like our guy and still is. He put the stamp in the city, in our city, and we all respect him. We all honor him every year. So Flip got a call from Robert. Robert at the time was working with Stephanie Mills. And the call was like Robert said, they were looking for a drummer. And and so I'm watching him on the phone. If they're gonna use Flip, they gotta use me too. I'm thinking this call is for both of us, right? Well, that
Right.
wasn't
Right.
the case. That was not the case. Anyway, he got the call. Robert offered him a situation with Stephanie Mills. And of course, he said yes. And when Flip got off the phone, I asked him, I said, man, you know, what about me? What about me? He said, bro, he said, they got a bass player. He's calling for me. Man, dude, I was overwhelmed, happy. I was happy for my brother. The very next day, they sent a long stretch white limousine to pick him up, to take him to, I think, to North Carolina or somewhere where they were rehearsing. And but he told me, he said, Derek, listen, our journey, our beginning to success starts today. He said, we will no longer struggle. We will no longer do without. I'm going to send you money every week so you can do what you have to do. Keep the pinto running until I get back. Woo, 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 woo. We're going to get it fixed. The reason why that was the beginning of my time, I think because it was a victory and it was success. Doesn't seem like it's like success for him, but it was success for me. I'm gonna tell you why, because I no longer had to worry about where my next meal was coming from. I no longer had to stress. My mental would allow me to be more focused on the big picture instead of worried about how we're going to get the two burgers for $1 and how we're going to get the things so the stress was over for me. When that stress and that burden was over, my focus, my drive, because my brother was taking care of me. So now, 6 months later, I'm hustling and I'm doing my thing. And our people that I had been meeting down, for the past couple of years, they dug me. I got an offer. My first big thing was I got an offer to play with Sheila E's ex band. They had a band called 13 Cats with Cat Gray. At the
Mm.
time, it was Ken Gray before he was Cat Gray. And they offered with Carl Perazzo was in the band, Cat Gray. I mean, all these guys. And so they asked me to be in this band. And all we had to do was rehearse and get ready to record a record. We were just trying to get a record deal. They were being backed and financed by one of the owners of the Seattle Seahawks. We would go to every day to Mulholland Drive and just big mansion. And my job was to rehearse 5 days a week. And I was getting paid now on my own money. I was getting paid $400 a week just to do that, right? That's it. So now that's where the break happened. Group never got a deal. Group never got signed at all. So the group started doing little things. Like we did a thing with El DeBarge. You mentioned El DeBarge. We did a TV show called Sidekicks where we was the house band.
Mm.
And after that, we got a call to play with Shalimar. That's when things started to really take off.
Yeah. Yeah.
We got a call to play with Shalimar, and in that band was incredible. Kurt Scara, Michael Norfleet, Cat Gray, just an incredible band. And that was the beginning of my journey. And it was there. Shalimar was my first tour, and then it
Now, was
just
this the original Shalimar or one of the iterations?
great question, man. I see why you so dope, bro. What happened was I was excited because I've always been a fan of Howard Hewitt, right? So when I joined the band, Howard was leaving.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Howard was leaving. So I was sad about that. But then again, they had a great brother. Mickey Free was there. Mickey Free was the Lisa Davis, Mickey Free, Howard Hewitt. That
Okay.
was dancing in the sheets and all that stuff,
Now,
right?
wait a minute. Now, I gotta say,
Yeah.
that iteration, they
Yeah.
did have some dope cuts. They had some dope cuts. Now I'm of the, make this a night to, that's, that's where, and I don't know if you know this, but I had a very, very short tenure with Miss Watley
Oh,
in
no,
2017. Story for another time. But um, that iteration of Shalimar is not, is not to be sneezed at. Not at
no,
all. Not at
no.
all.
And the reason why, Ted, is because we were playing all them records, right?
Yeah.
Shalimar, the Shalimar that I was working with Mickey, Delisa Davis, and my dear, 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 dear brother, got to shout him out, Mr. Sidney Justin. Um, they had a record called A Circumstance or something
He
like
was
that.
a circumstantial evidence.
Circumstantial evidence and
Yes.
games and all that. So I
Yeah.
was I
Yeah.
was a part I was a part of that band and that
Games were funky.
games was funky, right?
Your
Baby
boy was a football player before he joined Shalimar, right?
played for the Rams,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So we did games, and games was funky. It's kind of had, the record Babyface did was cool, and so that's the run I did with that Shalimar,
Yeah.
and it was cool. I was grateful. My first trip to Japan came from Shalimar. My first real tour came from Shalimar, and then Ted, it's just things, just one thing after another. My brother was still playing with Stephanie Mills. He was doing good, and Stephanie, that's when she was just
The 80, yeah, yeah. She was at her height.
blowing up everything, right? At this time, blowing up everything. So, but that was my beginning of the start of Derek Allen. It wasn't even DOA then. It was just Derek Allen. I'll tell you the DOA story. It was just Derek Allen. And then from that, after Shalimar came Troop with the first
Hmm.
album with Mamacita. The
Hmm.
beautiful thing about that was it drew me and my brother back together because when he was finished with Stephanie, they had like 6, 7 months off. He and I auditioned for Troop and we got the job together.
Ah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I gotta tell you something, bro. I've been fortunate and blessed, man, to work with a lot of people, a lot of artists, man, a lot of great tours and just being able to see the world, man. It's just been crazy for me. Playing with Troop, man, was the greatest experience I've ever had with an artist on tour.
Really? What makes it, and for those of you who are if your breath still smell like Similac, you may not know who Troop is. Spread my wings and
Hey,
fly.
there you go.
Man, listen, that's we talking, I'm in high school or just getting out of high school around that time.
Wow.
That's holding hands on the
Come on
lakefront,
now. Come on
trying
now.
trying to get some cookies.
Right, 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 right.
You know what I'm saying?
But so I'm gonna tell you what made it the best for me, man. It was the least amount of money I've ever made on a tour. It was when I say a ghetto ass situation. We had a bus that only slept six, which went to Troop, the principals. We all rode on the bus together, and we had close to, if I can remember, with the band, we had close to 18 people on this bus. So, dude, we were sleeping, and the bus was like more like a camper. Oh man, it was the Green Machine, man, the Green
Yeah.
Machine. The bus would break down. Every other city was breaking down, but man, and we were making pennies, man. But the brotherhood, man, was incredible, bro. I mean, those guys at that time, when Mamacita was out, their first album, those guys were sensations, man. They were rock stars. I'm talking about, I never experienced anything like it, man. It was like I was playing with the Beatles. I
Mm.
mean, they would draw fans and girls. Oh my God, dude, it was just crazy. And they work hard. They dance hard. That people compare them like saying, "Well, that New Edition." They were a little different than New Edition. Um, you know, these guys were like street dancers, and they danced hard. They
Mm-hmm.
were funky street dancers. New Edition was a little smooth, and more polished in that direction.
Right, right,
Not taking anything away because they idolized New Edition. We all did. But
right.
True and man, let me tell you, dude, we was getting this much of the stage because we were opening up, and we were opening up to people like Keith Sweat, Rob Bass, all these people, Kid and Play. It was that kind of thing.
Right.
So what made it the best for me, it wasn't even about the money, man. It was the love and the brotherhood. We were doubling up rooms. Steve Russell, he always wanted to room with me because he was crazy. I was crazy. We both were crazy. And man, some of the stories I could tell you about that, man, will go to my grave, Steve and I.
Right.
But man, listen, it was the most fun. And when we left that tour, man, it was probably like 6 months. And when we left, that's when touring was real, first of all.
Yeah.
There was no weekends, and people call these weekend dates tours, or you go out for 6 weeks and that's a tour. No, man, when we was touring, we was doing it 6, 12 months, 18 months, with breaks in between.
Right.
That's with 6 or 7, 8, 9 tour buses and semis, and that's what tour was
Budgets
really.
were different.
They were way different.
Yeah.
So that was for me my most favorite, and I love those guys even to this day. We still got a deep connection in the brotherhood.
Well,
From
what they say, the gig triangle, right? The music, the money, and the hang, right?
that's it, bro.
You gotta have two of those. Now, I really want you said something a little while ago about the networking, and I
Yes.
and I really want to touch on that because even to this day, I hear people are, oh man, don't play for less than $100, blah blah blah. And I still, a lot of times I hear that from people. I'm like, you ain't done nothing. Like you haven't done anything. And should $100 gig be your standard all the time? No, I'm not saying that. But I know some of the relationships that I've built, some of the relationships I have now. Hell, this conversation that we're having right now can be traced back to some gig that didn't pay nothing at one time. And I remember Uriah Duffy back in the day. Uriah's played with some of everybody too. Man, it
That's the
is nothing to see Uriah play a casual or a wedding or something like that. He's
There you go.
working, but I know that back in the day, he was just doing it. Now I get that there's an age thing there as well. At a certain point, you got to be like, but there's I put something out on Instagram a few days ago talking about being young, and like when you young, you don't have a bunch of responsibilities. You better go out there and take some chances and do the things like the sleeping on the floor, doubling up
Absolutely.
rooms and things like that.
Absolutely.
But I want to hear in your words a little bit more about that
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
situation.
Well, I always tell people your network is your net worth, and it's very important. It's always important to understand that. You always have to understand what your value is. You got to understand your value, and you got to protect your value.
Sure
So
thing.
so that's a very deep question. And I'll just use me for an example. When I finished Janet Jackson, the it appears to everybody, and it looks like, oh man, DOA is on. We can't afford him now. He just came off with Janet. That's the perception. That's the persona, which is not a bad thing, which is a good thing.
Sure.
So you got to protect that part.
Sure.
Okay, you always want to protect that part. In other words, I had a chance to play with another artist. I'm not going to mention his name, but he was on fire at that time. But he was
Mm,
nowhere bigger than Janet, right? I had a
mm,
chance when we did Janet. We There was another call that fell in everybody's lap, and Brother Man was on fire, 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 just blowing up the world, but not big as Janet. My thing was, man, okay, because after Troop was Karen White, after Karen White was Janet Jackson, right? So
right.
now I'm on this major situation, and I want to be like the Nathan East and the Jonathan Moffats. I want to see that part of it. I want to. So I feel
Jonathan Moffat is from New Orleans. I just
right
want
on, man. Shout out to Jonathan. So I'm thinking to myself, I said, I'm gonna pass on that gig because what's next? The next big thing would be playing with Michael Jackson.